It's a new day on Deep Space Nine, but Sisko, Dax, Odo, and Plain Simple Garak wouldn't know anything about that. They're in a mega shuttle on their way back from a Bajoran conference about the occupation, and one where not everybody was equally welcomed. At least Odo got a warm reception, his reputation for dealing with Bajorans fairly during his time working for the Cardigans carrying a lot of weight. Back on DS9, we detect Sisko's mega shuttle incoming. Odd thing, though, they're on autopilot and life signs are weak. There's also residue of a science wibbly on the hull. Over we go to check things out, and Bashir says there are some weird wibblies happening in their brainial meats. Beyond that, he doesn't have the foggiest what's going on. Neither does Sisko, who wakes up in civilian clothing. We're on a poorly lit promenade of DS9, though the abundance of Cardigans with guns suggests we're not on DS9 so much as Terok Nor, their name for it during the occupation. The others are roused, and off we go to find somewhere private and figure out what the hell's going on. Bashir's trying to do much the same. We've done a science and figured out the mega shuttle flew through a wibbly, but that doesn't explain why our lot are currently unconscious yet have brains firing on all cylinders. Back on Terok Nor, we've concluded this isn't time fuckery. Our clothes have changed and we're not getting any of the curious looks that we should be getting. A human, Trill, and Changeling have no reason to be here, yet nobody's batting an eyelid. That has Sisko theorizing everybody else sees them as Bajoran, despite looking the same to each other. Plain Simple Garak wants to take the brute force approach and announce that we're not supposed to be here to the guards. He has plenty of Cardigan secrets and thinks this will be enough to prove he's telling the truth. Odo suspects this would be a one-way ticket to Torture Town, and Sisko's inclined to agree. As we're watching Seagull Ducat chatting to someone, Odo bumps into a corpse. At least the not insignificant burn on his chest and unhealthy pallor suggests as much, and the fact he disappears when Odo turns around briefly confirms that he's not above board. The others don't see him or clock Odo becoming increasingly agitated, but then they're focused on who was talking to Seagull Ducat. Apparently, he was the guy who had the job of security chief before Odo, which means we're at least 5 years before the end of the occupation. As Odo's predecessor has some lines later on, let's go ahead and bring out the Wheel of Names to slap one of our own on him. If you're new here, then patrons of the channel can suggest names for the wheel, and when I can be bothered, and my PC isn't lying in bits like the last episode, we'll spin it for random guests. And today's winner is the wild card. Back at the end of 2023, in the Season 5 summary of Voyager no less, I opened the wheel up to take a single suggestion from the YouTube rabble. If you're still watching Ralphie No Pants, then your day has finally come, as we'll be calling Odo's predecessor Johann von Beaverdonker. Does somebody who's not a patron getting their name in the episode undermine the benefits of signing up? Yes, it does! I never said I was smart. No time to consider all that, though, as some guards grab Dax. Plain Simple Garak tries to talk them out of taking her and gets a bonk on the noggin for his trouble, then Dax is dragged away. Back on DS9, Plain Simple Garak has developed a nosebleed. It started when there was a wibble in his brainial activity, so Bashir thinks they're linked. He doesn't have a clue why, but he is a touch concerned that it might indicate the potential for far worse. We want to help Dax, but before we do that, Plain Simple Garak thinks it would be wise to figure out who this reality thinks we are. Computer access would do it, so it's lucky that Plain Simple Garak took the opportunity to nick a gizmo from the arsehole who hit him. Sisko was right about them being seen as Bajorans. The gizmo identifies him as Ishan, a name Odo seems to recognize. He knows the name Jalur when Plain Simple Garak says it too, and is able to guess the third as Timor without being told. Before Odo gets the chance to explain how, the three are collared by Quark. He needs people to work in the bar, for a pedant's mind, and he selected us. It's better work than Dax, at least. She's arrived in Seagull Ducat's office, her selection due to being both young and female. Not to worry, though, at least not yet. Whatever his end goal, he'd rather satisfy his ego first, and for him, that means talking about himself. To the lads we go once more, and they're cleaning up in Quark's, while Odo explains how he knew their names. After seeing 3 more phantom corpses walk by, anyway. He says the names were in an old security file about an attempt on Seagull Ducat's life. They didn't do it, but were executed anyway, which is a real pisser for us if we're them. Johann von Beaverdonker arrives to grill Quark about a smuggler, one he spills his guts over after being told this smuggler in particular is of interest to the Obsidian Order. Odd thing, though, Plain Simple Garak recognizes the smuggler's name as he was actually a Romulan spy, one who didn't start working here until 3 years before the end of the occupation, which would make it 2 years later than we thought we were. A quick check confirms the date, and that raises an additional question, as the guy currently in charge of security here should be Odo. Odo waves it away as another unexplained point, instead saying we should focus on getting the hell out of here. Just as well, then, that Kira once told Sisko about a signal they used on Terok Nor back in the day for contacting the Resistance. Off we go to get some food, though Sisko fiddles with a shopkeeper's display on the way. That was the signal, apparently, so we eat while we wait. Seagull Ducat makes his rounds while we do, but at least Dax is with him, so we know she's okay. She's certainly doing better than Odo, who sees blood on his hands and drops his spoon, only for it to be gone when he checks. We'll have to worry about that later, as our Resistance contact is here. Sisko's just getting started on trying to arrange transport when the kaboom happens. Seagull Ducat is down, but bollocks to him, so is Dax. Sisko's quickly over there and checking her despite Odo trying to make him scarper. It wouldn't have worked anyway, as even Plain Simple Garak gets collared, and he'd already tried to make himself scarce. Johann von Beaverdonker, who looks a lot like a certain time-ship captain from the Delta Quadrant by the way, thinks he has us banged to rights. We're all new here, from the same area of Bajor, and with links to the Resistance. Okay, most people have links with the Resistance after 50 years of occupation, but we have chemicals used for bomb-making on us. Okay, those chemicals are found in cleaning fluids we used in Quarks, but we also ran towards the attack. Okay, we were checking on Dax, but a guard told him that we were throttling Seagull Ducat. Odo batting away all the arguments with no small amount of familiarity, and telling Johann to investigate properly doesn't convince him. Cardigans like their justice swift, so there'll be a tribunal tomorrow, and, as is tradition, we'll have our guilt explained to us beforehand. Or perhaps not. Dax is with a convalescing Seagull Ducat. Once the room is cleared, and she tires of hearing his voice, she bonks him on the noggin and scarpers. Back in the cells, Sisko wants to know all about Johann von Beaverdonker. Things aren't right, not least of which him being here instead of Odo. A very defensive Odo doesn't have answers, so it's handy that the back wall provides a distraction by melting. Dax has arrived to rescue them. Others try to stop them getting away, not least of which Johann von Beaverdonker himself. The fight goes our way, though, and he decides to bugger off by turning into goop and escaping through a conduit. No time for that right now, though, so we get to a ship and step in. Appearing right back in the holding cell again is a bit of a surprise, and so is being told by a guard that we're scheduled to get murderized in a couple of hours. Escape clearly isn't the answer given what just happened, and Sisko's done cocking about with Odo. He demands to know what Odo's holding back, so it's unfortunate that Johann von Beaverdonker arrives and takes Odo for a chat instead. Odo tries to convince Johann that he's making a mistake and, when that fails, reveals that we're from the future. If Odo was expecting surprise, he's shit out of luck. Johann von Beaverdonker already knows. Changing things isn't up to him, though. It's up to Odo, who he calls by name. We jump to the promenade, where we're watching the start of Sisko, Dax and Plain Simple Garak's execution. Odo's arguing that this is wrong, that this isn't what happened, and eventually interferes to stop it personally when Johann does nothing. Another jump, and now we're all properly dressed. Weapons fire heralds the executions starting on the next walkway, executions watched not by Johann von Beaverdonker, but by another Odo in a stern, cardigan-looking uniform. The other characters all disappear afterwards, leaving our Odo to explain that he was head of security when all this happened for real. Another bombing after their executions made him re-examine the evidence and realize he'd fucked up. They were all innocent, something he could have proven if he'd done the work. The others disappear, and Odo wakes up along with them in Bashir's infirmary. Psychic shenanigans. That's what Bashir thinks, or the changeling version of it anyway. Odo's brain still has some changeling juice in it apparently, and the wibbly they flew through in the mega shuttle locked he and the others into a form of the link other changelings use when they meld. Odo suspects him thinking about his past error before the wibbly is what made them all relive it. Still, at least it's over, and possibly along with his reputation as the impartial third party during the occupation. Kira knows now, this being a couple of days later, and she's not sure what to think. Neither is Odo, it seems, so we'll leave him to contemplate whether this was the single error that made him a better investigator, or just the only one that he knows about, until the next adventure. A history lesson then, and one in which we learn Odo was only human even before he was only human. The error itself is understandable even though it's deeply unfortunate, but the more serious issue is keeping it secret. Not turning over every rock when you're under significant pressure and have a plausible explanation might be negligent, but it's not dishonest. Keeping the truth to yourself for the best part of a decade, on the other hand, is entirely self-serving. Still, is it really so surprising when we think about it? Odo arrived on the station not long after his unpleasant departure from a laboratory and filled with doubt about who and what he was. When others started considering him an impartial and trustworthy third party, that may well have been his first experience of being judged on how he acted rather than what he could mimic. Latching onto that as a defining characteristic is easy to sympathize with, even before you consider his innate desire for order. So when that characteristic was threatened, that reputation as more than just a party trick, his panic and resulting secrecy becomes far easier to explain. The truth risked taking away the identity he'd gained, his sense of self, and being even an outsider is far better than an object of curiosity. We all have secrets and mistakes and shame. There are plenty of people in the world who would have just buried it and let that be the end. That Odo used his failure to fuel a desire for never failing again is as admirable as his mistake is unfortunate. There's also the argument to be made that this is all vaguely unfair on Odo. Kira not being sure how to process Odo's actions is largely based on a perception of him being infallible, which is an entirely unreasonable starting point. Are we punishing the failure at this point, or the fact that we've learned he's capable of them, just like the rest of us? It's all so messy, and that, like a lot of Deep Space Nine, is where the series best stands out from other old Trek. It's been a while since I've had a good old nitpick here, so before we end this one, let's have a go today. Fair warning, this gets a bit heavy on incidental detail, so if that's not your bag, you can safely skip it. Rest assured that none of this matters beyond my own curiosity. Now then, if, like me, you've been paying slightly more attention than you really should do to set design through the seasons, you may have noticed that the area behind Odo's desk in the security office has changed since we first saw it. We get our initial look at the security office in the third episode of Season 1, assuming you count the pilot as a two-parter. Anywho, behind Odo's desk is the flat surface of a table. The walls to both sides are bare, save for how they're secured. Our first change is noticed in episode 18, when we see that the securing method in the walls has been replaced. I presume it's because these are now actual bolt heads rather than nuts on a threaded rod, which is safer for people on set, assuming they're real and not just greeblies. It's also a bit neater. The second change is the replacement of the table for consoles in episode 2 of the second season. Later that season, in episode 8, a replicator alcove appears in the right-hand wall, which makes change 3. Change 4 is the addition of a weapons case, which we first see in episode 5 of season 3. So far, so what, right? Well, if you're making shows for pedantic twats, changes to sets cause some problems for time travel episodes. The Season 2 episode Necessary Evil shows us the security office during the occupation, and it has a replicator in it, one that wasn't there before that episode. This episode also shows us the past version of the security office, and just as before, it has both the rear consoles and the replicators, ones that, according to the first season, should not be there. The real reason is that the prop department makes updates to sets when appropriate. The consoles probably appeared in Season 2 due to a cash injection. Maybe the replicator appeared later that same season because they had a spare and wanted to use it, or maybe someone accidentally put a hole in the wall and they just rolled with it. Real answers are no fun though, so let's ignore them. What appear to be continuity errors do have a potential explanation if we use a bit of mental gymnastics. We know the whole station got raffle stomped when the Cardigans buggered off, so a bank of damaged consoles and a buggered replicator wouldn't be high on the list of priorities. If we assume that these things existed during the occupation and got damaged, O'Brien may well have just stuck in a temporary fix with a table and a blank wall while he got more important stuff back online. It's not like Odo needed a replicator anyway, other than for the people in custody. The security office is also just across from the replimat, so that solves the problem in the short term. A year of Odo complaining that he could keep better track of things with the original console replaced would likely be enough for O'Brien to get around to doing it. With nothing to complain about anymore, maybe Odo started thinking about that replicator. Time spent queuing at the replimat is time not watching his inmates. Cue another visit from O'Brien later that year. As to the weapons case, that's a bit more tricky. We know Odo doesn't use them after all, so he wouldn't have requested it. He might, however, have been overruled. The end of Season 2 introduced us to the Jem'Hadar and made us aware of how potentially dangerous the Dominion is. The start of Season 3 is when we got the Defiant, so some defensive upgrades around the place at the same time make sense as part of an overall push. Odo may not want the weapons, but there are others who might, and the security office is the best place for an armory on the promenade. Are we massively overthinking incidental details again? Of course we are. None of these things should be given a second glance, let alone all of what you've just heard. But as I've said before, half of the fun of fictional universes comes from headcanon stuff, so you'll forgive my little indulgences. End of episode.
How's reinstallation 208 coming along?
I think I'm getting the hang of it.
Yeah, that one lasted a full hour.
Exasperated sigh. Do you want to call Tom?
Nope, that dickhead Paris can chew me daddy's sack. I've got every faith in your technical abilities.
Are you sure? Only we could try to off him in the process.
We're not allowed. That plot's from the Voyager credits, so it hasn't happened in this timeline yet.
But we already...
Timey-wimey stuff, mate. Don't mess.
Fair enough. That does leave us with the original problem.
What were we doing again?
Trying to drive a search engine to the GeoCity.
Oh, yeah, escaping this lad's PC for Pringle theft. Christ, it's all getting a bit convoluted, isn't it?
Just imagine we're driving on a motorway.
You mean only paying attention to what's right in front of us?
No, I mean desperately trying to find an exit before the whole thing runs out of fuel. Woof.